Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's all great and fantastic and wonderful. I brought the Kindle with me today so that I could hold it up to say I finished a book. And that was The Wheel of Time, Book 3, The Dragon Reborn. I have finally finished it. It took me a while. I put it down for quite a while during the middle section. And read some manga and stuff in between, played a bunch of video games, and then came back and just plowed through it over the weekend. I had about a quarter of the book to go or so. So I flew through that. And I can tell you, the last quarter of this book is when things start to really go off for the whole series. I remember that much, and I remembered that much from my previous attempts at reading this series. I did not remember just how slow Book 2 was. I always remember really enjoying Book 2, but I think it's because in Book 2, the main characters, the main group of people start to become their own, and they start to have their own traits and their own specialties and their own things, and it's honestly kind of boring. It took too long to do that. Book 3, the characters all develop those traits and things further, and that's much more interesting. That's much more engaging to read. There were still some slow bits, and I did quite a bit of skimming on some of the longer chapters, and the reason is, this is probably some sort of spoiler alert, but if you haven't read the series, again, I've only ever read to book 7 or 8. I'm not exactly positive where I stopped the last time I tried. There are things that you read in these books that you will read again. Meaning, entire scenes or sequences will happen again. They'll be slightly different. But when you read it, you'll go, wait, that sounds really familiar. Have I already read this? And if you go look, yeah. In the first book, there's an entire section of that book that is out of time with the rest of the book. Chronologically, it's out of order. And it was supposed to be kind of a flashback, I think, but as the reader, it was just a confusing mix. But Jordan fixes that later by... He likes to tie into the themes of time being a wheel and everything happens again. And that happens in these books. So there were some sequences in here. There were some particular moments in here that in my head I thought came 2-3 books later. I thought they were much later in the series. I still think they are, but they're also in here. And it's just a really weird and sometimes confusing thing. And it means that, especially later, once things start to repeat, you can kind of just skim it. Move on, right? I don't need to read all these words again. I've already read these words. And that is a product, I think, of just the way these books were written and released. Meaning that if you read this series as it was released, every couple of years you got to read, I think that a lot of the repetition, a lot of the cyclical stuff that happens would be refreshing, or would be a little bit of a bring you up to speed kind of thing, and it would have been much more interesting. If you're reading these books just plow through the series, it becomes really, really tedious. Super tedious. It's just oh my god, just stop. Right? And Jordan does have a tendency to re-explain things. I've said that in previous reviews for the series, that he re-explains every concept and character every time he reintroduces them in a new book. So in the beginning of the next book, when you meet a character, he gives you an explanation of that character. When you see some power happen, he gives you an explanation of that power. He does that every single book, and it becomes really tedious. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is inside the book, he will often repeat and tell you something over and over again. That's really tedious. And sometimes it's not just a few words. A lot of times it is. A lot of times he will re-emphasize a character's assets or traits when he introduces when they haven't been on page for a few chapters and he brings them back. He'll reintroduce their assets to you or their traits to try to in some ways it helps solidify that character in your head. I happen to be using a companion app called the Watt Companion, and it lets you select the book that you're reading, and then you can type a character's name in, and it'll give you a definition of that character up to that book. So it doesn't spoil future things that happen. It doesn't tell you everything, but it helps you keep those characters in mind, because again, if you've watched my previous things, there's like hundreds of characters to keep track of in these books, and they all have weird names, and it's really difficult to keep track of. That being said, the last quarter of this book brought me to tears a couple of times, like not crying, but welling up, feeling emotionally invested in the characters going through something that really got to me, the characters blossoming. The end of this book is not just the Dragon Reborn. If you don't know that, surprise, the title of the book is exactly what happens, and that's a big important thing. But ultimately, what's more important, in my opinion, at the end of the book, is the flowering of the supporting cast. They go through some transitions at the end of the book also. They go through these little twists. They go through some pretty major, plot points that force them to become something different. And that really gets me. Like, stuff like that, when I become, like, it's almost like I feel pride for that character, if that makes any sense. Jordan really does have a great way of making me feel connected to the character. Funnily enough, as a want-to-be writer, as somebody who has tried to write books and I've written dozens and dozens of stories, but I've never finished a book. I've written one, but I haven't finished it. He does a lot of repetition, like beating into your head. A character feels this way. A character feels this way. A character feels this way. For instance, we'll talk about Perrin. All through the first 3 books, after Perrin uses his axe for the first time, Jordan just smashes it into your brain that Perrin hates this axe, but he keeps carrying it with him and he doesn't know why. He hates this axe, but he keeps carrying it with him and he doesn't know why. He hates this axe, but dozens of times you get to hear about Perrin's hatred for this axe that he carries around. But it really sets up an emotional payoff when Perrin goes through a change, when Perrin's arc changes. It really does help pay off. It can be frustrating in the moment because you're like, okay, dude, I've heard enough about this stupid axe, but it pays off, and then I get a little bit emotional about it, and then it's fun, right? It's like, I'm glad I read that. So, first 3 books are down. There's still 11 to go. I'm feeling pretty good about making it through the series. I boldly claimed at the end of last year that I could do like the first 5 books before the end of the year, and I did not pull that off. I still think I could finish the series by the end of this year. That was my plan. But if these last 2 books are any indicator, I'm only reading like 1 book every 2 months. That's pretty slow pace, and I've already transitioned to reading other stuff right now. In fact, I'll probably finish another book today and tell you about it tomorrow. So there'll probably be 2 book reviews back to back, but it's a completely different thing in a different universe and a different style and everything else. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. But I still think I can probably get at least 4 more books in before the end of this year. So we'll try that. We'll try to hit 7, which will tell me if I made it to 8 or not. But maybe I'll get in a reading mood and I will read through all of them. I don't know. But at the current pace, I don't see that happening. I'm just going to keep reading until I'm finished. I'm just going to plow through it. So there'll be videos, for the rest of this series. Overall, I really enjoyed The Dragon Reborn, mostly because of that last quarter. The first bits, there were some interesting payoffs and some interesting setups. That's the other thing. Jordan sets up a lot. There is a lot of mystery and payoff in this series. There is a ton of characters know something, but you, the reader, don't. And you got to figure that out, or you will be told that later. And it's a pretty powerful moment when you find out, usually. Sometimes it's just kind of like, okay, why did you hide that from me? I don't know. But most of the time, it's a pretty good payoff. Good book. There we go. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is lagniappe. It is a noun meaning an unexpected bonus gift or extra benefit, the icing on the cake. Frederick would have bought the Porsche Panamera even without the lagniappe of free voice-activated navigation system. Lagniappe. Lagniappe. That has to be one of those weird French words that nobody's ever heard of, right? The pronunciation guide says lagniappe. That's what I went with, lagniappe. But man, that's a weird one. Would that be like an unexpected bonus gift or extra benefit? So not swag, lagniappe.